How's it going, everyone? And welcome back to the Fantasy Assessment. This is Season 2, Episode 11. My name is Rahul. You can find me on Twitter at SmallTalkFF. And I'm here as always with my co-hosts, Chu and Jerry. Chu, how you doing today, my man?
Living the dream. Currently enjoying watching Mike Boone and Jacob Hollister play for my Carolina Panthers. So nothing could possibly go wrong.
Could anything be better than that? The NFL is back, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, this is, I guess, the official start of preseason. Hall of Fame game kind of exists in its own parallel universe, but we were treated to some scintillating football today in the two games. But very excited for the fast upcoming season. Jerry, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Yeah, couldn't be more excited. The NFL's back. Got to see a little bit of Drake May, a little Joe Milton right now, and yeah, we got games on pretty much every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the arrival of August really signals the start of the football. You can sense it in the air, But I mean, even if the games today weren't too exciting, yeah, that's right. There's really preseason football all through the weekend and for the next couple of weeks before we get to the NFL season kickoff, which I believe is the week after Labor Day, if I'm not wrong. September 5th, 7th, around that kind of range. But anyway, this is, of course, the Fantasy Assessment, your one-stop shop for advice tailored to your rosters. Today, we're going to be attacking early redraft ADP, get you prepared for your seasonal leagues. We're going to be going through using Fantasy Pros ADP as a guide, which I can't lie, guys, like pretty sharp. I was kind of looking at it in July, and it seems with the August update, a lot of my so-called sleepers and targets have moved a round or two up. Maybe that means I'm on the right trend, but very excited to get into this episode with both of you. Before that, of course, we have our segment of Choose Your Fighter.
Fight!
That is, of course, the weekly segment. Bi-weekly, I guess. We're on every other week. But the weekly segment where we have a question of the week and each of us gives our candidates or today's situation that takes home the bacon. Question in the spirit of preseason is, what player or situation are you looking at most during this preseason to kind of get a heads up, a leg up before the 2024 NFL season? Jerry, I'll go to you first.
Well, I'm going to keep it local, keep it hometown. I'm looking at the Bills wide receiver room. Josh Allen, of course, is top 3 fantasy quarterback, top 1, 2, wherever you want to rank them. And with Stephon Diggs being gone, the ball's got to be going somewhere. And will it be Kincaid? Will it be, how much does Keon Coleman get in the first year? How much does Khalil Shakir get as more of a full-time guy now? Or Curtis Samuel, who was brought in this offseason, or Dawson Knox coming back from injury. So it's kind of, mostly the wide receiver room, because we kind of know that Kincaid's going to be TE1 and Knox is going to be more of the blocking tight end and out there for as tight end too. But I want to see like how Coleman is playing on the field. I want to see if Shakir is returning kicks and if that's a good sign or a bad sign, because you don't want your kick returner also just taking all those hits and then drafting him in fantasy and potential injury there. So I want to see what's going on there and just because we know Josh is probably going to throw for 4,500 yards and 28 to 30 touchdowns. I want to get the right guys that he's going to be throwing it to.
Right, exactly. Josh Allen, at least in fantasy football, has been as safe of a bet as you really can make. It's going to be a very interesting room to analyze in preseason as the season kicks off. What about you two? What player situation are you most interested in looking at during preseason?
Well, when I was first looking at this, I immediately had jumped to the Packers wide receivers. But when I was thinking about what we're really going to discover in preseason, I don't know that we're going to necessarily find out too much in terms of what it's going to look like for the regular season for them. But a situation I do think we might get a little bit of light shed on is the Saints quarterback room, and most specifically Spencer Rattler. I don't assume he's going to usurp Derek Carr necessarily this season. Unless it really goes off the rails. But I think it's after not this season, but the next season is the only first real out they have for his contract. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think Derek Carr is done. I know he's hit a bit of a speed bump or at certain points last year a flat out brick wall. But I do think Spencer Rattler, falling as far as he did, I know with all the nonsense with his Netflix show and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure painted him in a bad light for a number of teams. But he's an exciting player, I think, in that kind of offense. Depending on what the coaching staff and everything even looks like in a year or two, they could clean house there. So I'd be interested to see if he's lighting it up there in New Orleans with. I'm assuming he'll probably be throwing to like A.T. Perry and some of those guys, another tremendous player. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, great call there, especially if you're in your dynasty leagues. A little bit past rookie drafts now, but make sure that Spencer Rattler is definitely not on the waiver wire in your leagues. He definitely has that opportunity. I would just be worried with the Saints. O-line already lost one of their better linemen for the whole season. And we saw how Derek Carr was kind of having to avoid a lot of that last year. So very interesting one to follow. Just want to say a quick hi to Jamie. Thank you for joining us. As always, glad to have you here. Lockett, Cooks, or Shakir in best ball? He's on the clock. Jerry, what do you think on this one?
I'd probably lean Shakir. I'd rank him Shakir, Lockett, then Cooks. I think that obviously we know that Shakir's quarterback situation is the best of the three. Lockett's is a little shaky. I think we mentioned it either on the Wednesday show that we did with Jeff or one of the shows where Sam Howell, I think, could end up taking over in Seattle. And yeah, I'd probably lean Shakir, especially like I said, you get I don't know if best ball scores with kick returns and stuff like that, maybe touchdowns, but you get the potential of a Shakir returning a touchdown too.
Yeah, definitely a consideration if I think Shakir easily if return yards are there. What are you thinking here too, this trio?
I know he had a bit of a down year last year, but I'm still trusting Lockett. I know it is, a new coaching staff. I know Gino. I mean, whether he finishes this year or not, I don't know. I think it sounds like that injury scare that he had, he should be fine. But I do think the connection that they have, both Lockett and DK connecting with Geno Smith, it's going to be pretty fruitful this year. And, obviously Lockett is known for keeping himself healthy by running out of bounds after he catches the ball. And while it could be infuriating sometimes, it also keeps him in the game because he is my build currently. So I think he's kind of a safe floor player. And that could probably lend itself to what does your team look like right now? And are you looking for a floor guy, someone to plug in, or are you looking for someone who could maybe have a couple of more boom games, which Lockett had been known to have, but not as much recently.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I do want to give let me split the tie. I'll say Shakir just because you could have that upside if he does end up leading that room that I don't think, definitely not Cooks and probably not Lockett at this age are going to get. Yes, Jamie, we are very smart. Thank you. But do want to give a quick shout out to Cooks, who, especially down the stretch, has some boom games. It was basically long touchdown or bust, but in best ball, long touchdown or bust is perfectly okay. You never have to figure out exactly which week those are coming, but a tough one. I think Shakir, 2-1 there. Thanks for the question, Jamie. But let me get on to my choose your fighter, and that is going to be the Bengals backfield split. Truly, there are a couple of backfields I probably could have said this about, but I'm going to stick with the Bengals because all offseason I've been, riding Zach Moss, get Zach Moss. Sad that I couldn't get him in another league, what have you. In the last 2 weeks, and see the Chase Brown momentum has really taken off, especially in that Twitter sphere where it's almost a bit of an echo chamber at times. But you can't deny that the camp buzz has been there, especially from the coaching staff for Chase Brown. So very interesting to see in these preseason games how the split goes, who gets the first snap. Might not be as important, but who's in on the kind of the third downs, who's catching passes, because both players actually have been talked up for their pass catching. Zach Moss, we know, is a much better pass protector. We did just hear, or I did just read that Joe Burrow will be playing in preseason, which is actually a welcome sight for fantasy managers because he always seems to get injured at the start of preseason and miss the entirety. We don't see him until week 1, but that is one that I'm very interested in looking at. As Jamie tells us, he did hit the button on Shakir, but let us know in the comments what you guys think. What player or situation are you looking for in preseason to kind of just maybe get ahead of your league mates and what patterns may continue into the regular season? With that being said, let's get on to the show. as we said, ADP analysis, kind of look where those pockets that we really like, players that we think are kind of mispriced in this early ADP. We're going to go Fantasy Pros half PPR ADP if you want to follow along in the side. Pretty simple. We're going to hit early round must have and early round fade first. These are top 50 overall players. Then we're going to go into some mid round targets. This is from 51 to 120. Chose that because 120 round 10 in your standard 12 team format. And then each of us will give a sleeper that's 121 and beyond. So a lot of good content at all levels of your draft. Stick around for this show. So let's kick it off. Go right to you, Jerry. Who is your early round must have based on early ADP?
I went with Derrick Henry. He's RB9 and 19th overall. And very important that we are talking redraft because, I'm all in on Derrick Henry and redraft. They have over 230 vacated touches with Gus Edwards gone. Dobbins really didn't get that much work, the little that he played last year. But 13 touchdowns Gus Edwards had last year too, and they really didn't bring in anybody outside of a rookie as far as wide receivers go. So pretty much the offense looks exactly the same as it has been, with the exception of just an upgrade at running back. And I think Henry's got another year or two left of getting the ball 300 times and pounding into the end zone 10 plus times. And he's in a spot where you can, if you pick in the early part of the first round, you can get one of those elite wide receivers and then come back with him in the second round. Or if you're at the turn in the first round, you could grab a Henry and then a secondary wide receiver, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown. Or if you pick in the middle of the first round, you can grab somebody and then still get Henry in the middle of the first or in the middle of the second. So, he's just pair him up with pretty much anybody. I think he doesn't have the pass catching background that you want in fantasy, especially being a half point PPR. I think we're talking about, but he can, and he has in the past, finish as RB1, and he's got the best offense to do it in right now.
Yeah, I love that shout. You kind of see some murmurings of people fading King Henry, but valid age. But at some point, the man's an outlier. You just gotta let him do what he does. Just want to say a quick hi to Albert. Thank you for joining us today. Chu, I'm going to ask you a little position comparison for Derrick Henry. He's going in 19th overall. Wide receivers going just ahead and just behind him. Devontae Adams, Drake London, Chris Olave. In that situation, let's forget what you've picked in the first round. Let's just go BPA. In that situation, would you take one of those wide receivers or would you go with Derrick Henry?
If we're fully ignoring the first round pick, I could still lean towards Henry because the fact that you're getting him that late, with him, I understand the age. I understand he's going to a new team. He had been with Tennessee, the entirety of his career. I think that also speaks to how tremendous of a talent he is, what offensive lines and what offenses as a whole he was able to just truck through, regardless of how atrocious they were. And I think now he's getting into a better situation where we know what Lamar Jackson does as a runner, more so in the open field, not necessarily in the red zone. And they're always trying to keep him protected. I really trust it. It's not inconceivable to think that Derrick Henry could have the most or, second most rushing touchdowns in his career simply just because of opportunity that he's going to have. But we also know what he can do just in terms of churning out yardage. So I like that in the second round.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you there. So, Chu, let's go on to who's your early round must-have.
Well, let's stick with the old head. So I'm going to go with Cooper Kupp. He is, in terms of the half PPR ADP, wide receiver 21, and he's going 41st overall. Ironically, heading into camp or heading into the preseason, Puka looked like he was banged up. I think he should be fine. Kyron Williams still coming back from his ankle injury, should also be fine. I know Higbee won't be back he's on the pup. I'm not sure when he's coming back. Colby Parkinson. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to say it, but I did. And but Cooper Kupp, we saw, he was coming back from injury last season, and I think came back pretty strong. But they were still kind of trying to figure out that dynamic between he and Puka with Matthew Stafford. But overall, I mean, I think this is kind of the final hoorah for Stafford and Cup connection. And not to say that Stafford is definitively leaving the team after this year, but I think once Puka really settles in and everything, I think the target share really is going to be split up even more fairly between the two. But Cooper Cup is going to go off this year. I think I have him really only just one spot ahead of that in my own rankings. But that's really just putting him at his floor in the sense of I'm even trying to bake into that. Yeah, he might be hurt a little bit, or staff. There might be some things going on with the offense where they need to spread it to Puka or to whoever else, or Kyron's going to run the air out of the ball one game. But I think Cooper Cup is a tremendous value there.
Yeah, I think I agree with you completely. Cooper Cup, the ADP is going to be very interesting to watch, especially with news of Puka Nacua suffering what doesn't seem like a serious injury, but an injury nonetheless. There's already been some kind of, Puka's going as wide receiver 7, right? And Cooper Cup 21. Feels like those almost need to meet in the middle a little more. One thing about Cooper Cup, and I'm going to go to you, Jerry, right after this for a similar kind of comparison, but Cooper Cup, when you compare his season to Puka Nacua, when the two were on the field, the red zone usage was much more significant for Cooper Cup. Puka himself, I think, only had 4 receiving touchdowns. And that's where, almost 3 years and now another healthy offseason of connection between the two really could be a revival kind of year for Cooper. I'm going to go to you, Jerry, comparing him to some of the running backs in that range. Right ahead, James Cook, Rachaad White. Right behind is Joe Mixon, Ken Walker, Kamara. Are you taking Cooper Cup there, or are you going for an RB?
No, I'm probably going Cooper Cup. The only player that I would consider of the ones that you listed would probably be Rachaad White.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to load up on the wide receivers, and I know that like everything's based on full health, and a full healthy Stafford with a full healthy Cooper Cup is a full healthy championship season.
Yeah. I think I agree with you, especially with some of those names aren't as like ironclad as, even a Henry tier, even the one slightly beneath him. I had a very hard time deciding who I wanted to go with early round must have. I really wanted to choose a wide receiver, but in the last couple of years, I keep falling for the trick of drafting one of these high-end wide receiver 2s to their ceiling. It happened to me with Michael Pittman 2 years ago. Happened to me with Calvin Ridley again last year, so I had to fight my natural urge to take like a Nico Collins or a Jalen Waddle. Instead, I'm going to go Jalen Hurts as my early round must-have. If this ADP of 32nd overall holds, if you can get Jalen Hurts at the back end of the third, I would take him every single time there. I did just write a whole longer post, if you will, about going for QB values, but it is important to acknowledge that the early elite QBs have also fallen around from late second to late third, and at that point, I will be going in on Jalen Hurts. A little bit of a down season where he still finished with around 22 points per game. There's some worries about the tush push being negated a little bit with especially the retirement of Jason Kelce. But I'm really excited for Kellen Moore to come in. I think the Eagles, after their Week 10 bye, honestly had one of the worst offensive schemes in the entire league. Almost kind of, really limped the playoffs into a wild card round exit, but maybe on the strength of their weapons. But it's just so uninspired. They were bottom of the league in rate of motion rate, which is really proven to be a more effective adding EPA to your game. So I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts bounce back season. He's my QB1. I mean, you maybe worry about the addition of Saquon, but I think there's just like so many talented options in that offense. I'm really excited this year for both AJ Brown, who's, being drafted in the first round, but Devonta Smith, very close to also making my list. But I really like the potential of both of those players playing inside a lot more. It remains to be seen who it will be, but Kellen Moore was really a master scheming up his leading wide receiver to play a lot more from the slot. We saw it CeeDee Lamb, saw it Keenan Allen, and I think Jalen Hurts is going to get a boost in his passing. Even if he loses one or two tush pushes, I think Eagles offense itself will go back to, top 5 in the league. So that's my candidate there. Let me ask you, Chu. Jalen Hurts, 32. Right ahead, Mike Evans, Ayuk, Collins. right behind Waddle, Rashad White. It's that kind of tier of skill player like RB or wide receiver like 12 to like 15. And what are you doing in that situation?
It was easy. I mean, Hurts is my QB1 too. I really think this is going to be his year. I do love. I hope it continues to suppress his ADP. All the nonsense of him and Sirianni were beefing. He was reaching out to Wink Martindale asking like playoff stuff. It's like, who cares about, like, that's just Philly media being Philly media. No one cares. They're gonna like Hurts is a tremendous talent. They locked down Devonta Smith just to secure, I guess, probably to deal with AJ Brown soon enough with the contract, but between those two, you got Dallas Goedert still, you got Saquon now. Like, the sheer number of weapons there, it's really hard to bet against that. Again, at worst, he's top 3. With the rushing upside, I understand Saquon takes a little bit away from that, but I do think also that Saquon will benefit from some dump offs as well. So I mean, Jalen Hurts will benefit from Saquon being able to take a dump off, double-digit yards, possibly for a touchdown. So I think he's going to be the QB1. And I think in that range, I'm willing to take that bet.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just a quick note that AJ Brown also did get an extension this offseason. So both those wide receivers locked in for the Eagles. I mean, AJ Brown's a little bit more of a diva compared to the Slim Reaper. So you probably have to be happy that, they got that deal done. But let me go on to Jerry for the first early round fade in top 50. What player are you fading at their current price?
I have Stephon Diggs here, wide receiver 19, 37th overall. It's not that I have any ill will against him for wanting out of Buffalo and all of that, but I think that I'm all in on Nico Collins, and I'm really not in on Tank Dell either. It's basically just Nico for me. I'll take a couple mix-ins here and there, and I'll grab a Dalton Schultz later on. But I just think that there's just too many mouths to feed with one football. I mean, if anybody, like CJ Stroud should be the guy that you really want, and then pick your poison on which pass catcher that you want. For me, it's Nico. So I'm trying to stay away from the Diggs and the Tank Dells and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, they got him at the 36th or 37th overall player, wide receiver 19. So you're looking at in a 12 team, like right at the beginning of the 4th round, where you can get other guys, and I'm sure you got the list up, but it's just too many people there in one offense, and especially with like Stroud potential sophomore slump, or just not feeding Diggs the 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns that he's been seeing the past couple of years.
Yeah, let me stay with you, Jerry, because of course, as a Bills fan, you've watched a lot of Stephon Diggs over the years. I want to ask you, just from watching the back half of the season, where Diggs' form obviously dropped off quite significantly, did coincide with an OC change to a more run-heavy game plan. So maybe that's one caveat you could say. But having watched Diggs, would you say, did you see that sign of drop-off? He is, 31? He's in his 30s at least.
No, I wouldn't say that I have. I just think that they spread the ball more. Kincaid was getting a little bit more action. James Cook was getting a little bit more action. And I think a lot of it has to do with the OC change, and that was what allowed them to kind of just move on from him.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a good note to have from someone who watched a lot of him. But let me go over to you, Chu. Who's your early round fade at their current price?
Well, let's keep going with receivers. So mine is Drake London at wide receiver 11, 21st overall. I'm waiting for this ADP to adjust. I thought it was just the honeymoon phase of oh my God, Drake London finally has a real quarterback, assuming Kirk is fully healthy, which as far as I know he is. I don't know any reports that say he's not. But I mean, at the end of the day, I've got him ranked as my wide receiver 17. And even with that, I'm still kind of thinking that might be a little bit too rosy. But I do understand he's a definitive wide receiver one of that team. Again, even with the bounce back from Pitts, it is very clearly London's target share. But I mean, the last couple of years, it was, he was the 10, 11 points per game kind of guy. Only 6 touchdowns the last 2 years. I do think he does get his first 1,000-yard season, and I do think he probably gets the most touchdowns thus far. But in his career in a single season, but that could mean he has 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns, and that would be career best in all those things. So at the end of the day, I do think he's going to take a step up in a number of categories, but I don't think that means he becomes a back-end wide receiver one. I think that's really kind of wish casting, and I think there's a number of weapons in that offense. I mean, even including just the depth of, the Tyler Algier as a running back. I know they had just lost Rondale Moore for the year, but Darnell Mooney. So, I mean, there's a number of weapons for Kirk to feed, and I really think the ball is going to be spread around a little bit more than people would like it to. But that doesn't mean that London will do poorly. He just won't do as incredibly as wide receiver 11.
Yeah, London, someone who was really steamed up as soon as the Kirk trade or at least signing was announced in March time, and kind of the momentum has felt like it's worn off a bit. You're seeing a lot more of these like mid wide receiver 2 rankings. Jerry, are you in or out at Drake London at his price? Wide receiver 11, 21st overall. You probably have to take him in, the late second. Are you in or out at that price? And you're on mute.
In a redraft, I'm kind of on the fence. In a dynasty, yeah, I'll take London. He's still young enough, and hopefully he gets some life after Kirk Cousins with Michael Penix. But in a redraft, I think I do want pieces of him, but same thing. I want the ADP to adjust for me to be in on him.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you there. So my player is a tough one, but I think the price just dictates this for me. I'm going to go with Sam Laporta, who's been drafted as a tight end 1 at 26th overall. To be fair, in this ADP, he's back-to-back. Travis Kelce's the next player at the tight end 2. I'd probably have Laporta to be my tight end 2 anyway. So it's not the positional ranking I disagree with, but I just think that kind of late second, early third price is not for me. It's kind of my read on the tight end landscape this year. And Sam Laporta, of course, set the tight end rookie reception record, had a phenomenal year, but he was tight end 1 in overall points. He was, I think, around tight end 2 or maybe tight end 3 behind both Kelce and Hawkinson on points per game. But his 11.5 points per game in his rookie year would have only ranked him around wide receiver 25 in a half PPR format. It's a big difference from the prime Kelce, Gronk, even some Andrews years where those players were scoring like true wide receiver 1s. They were getting like wide receiver 6 to 8 finishes in your tight end slot. Sam Laporta makes me a little bit worried because he got to that finish on the back of 10 touchdowns. The majority, Kelce, Jake Ferguson, who actually had the most red zone targets, they were finishing around the 5 mark. There could easily be variance, even though it is a high-powered offense. It could be a step up, but my main point is I just don't think the early tight ends, I don't think it's going to make as much of a difference as it has in the past few years. To put in some context, the 11.5 points per game that Sam Laporta had was 3 points ahead of where the tight end 8 finished on the year. If you take it back a year, Travis Kelce had 15.5 points. That was 4 points a game ahead of the tight end 2 that year. Hawkinson, who finished, around that 11.5, 11.7. You're just not getting that same difference that a prime Kelce did. Yes, these players, Laporta, McBride a little later, Kincaid, even Pitts might take that step up as we expect from a young player. But at this price right now, I don't think early tight end is for me. Jerry, what do you think about that Laporta price point, and how are you kind of approaching early tight end this year?
I like the I'm actually probably on the opposite
okay,
as
good,
far
good.
as this, because I do like Laporta. I think he could finish as a top 3 tight end. I like the Lions offense a lot. I would definitely take a shot at him in the second round, third. What was he at? He was at
26th overall.
Okay, so that's the end of the second. I'm just keep on thinking because I'm in a dynasty startup as we speak, so I just took him in the second round, early second. But in a redraft, yeah, I would take him end of the second, early third. As long as it doesn't even matter like what I take in the first 2 rounds if I double up running backs or double up wide receivers or 1-1. But I definitely I think that we're gonna get a lot more of the same of what we saw with Laporta. I think he's got a nice connection there with Jared Goff. I'm in on another guy on that team that he's on my list. I'll talk about him in a little bit, but kind of contradicting myself because I said staying away from Diggs because there's so many weapons. but there's also so many weapons in Detroit, and I like them. But yeah, I mean, I'm in on Laporta. I think that he could finish his TE1, and he's worth it where he's getting taken.
Okay, no, I agree with that. And my contention, not my contention to say that he won't finish as a top 3 tight end. I just don't know if that's going to be as difference making as before. So to split this tie, Chu, what are you kind of thinking on the Laporta price point?
Yeah, I mean, I have him as my tight end 1, but it's more just the cost piece of it in terms of I don't know if I would want to be drafting him there. Even again, I currently have him ranked as he will finish as the top tight end again. I mean, absolute worst case top 5. Like I don't see a scenario where he's finishing outside of 3 or 5 really. But I mean, looking at what they did in the offseason, they kind of just preserved what they have. There was Josh Reynolds, I think, had a pretty good supporting role last year, and then they kind of let him go, and it's Khalif Raymond going to be stepping up, who was already there, but I mean, I think will take on a bigger role. But overall, I think they like what they have. It's a strong offensive line. Jared Goff getting re-signed, obviously Amon-Ra getting crazy money. So they like what they have, and they did it very well last year. I think they're going to make a big playoff push this year. So Laporta is going to be a huge part of that.
Yeah, that I cannot disagree with. So those are some of our early round must-haves and fades. Let us know in the comments what y'all are thinking the early rounds. Let's move on to mid-round targets. This is from 51st to 120 overall. So let's say rounds 5 through 10. Chu, give me your first name as a mid-round target.
Well, tremendous transition, and you couldn't have known that this was going to be the case. Jake Ferguson,
Aha!
tight end of the Dallas Cowboys. His ADP is tight end 9, so 81st overall. I currently have him ranked as the tight end 6. And I know kind of like what we've talked about, when you have whoever's going to finish as the tight end 1 or tight end 2, if it's a Kelsey type of year type thing where there's a big enough gap, or if it's not a very big gap between, the first couple. For Ferguson, he had a huge step up sophomore year. He was someone who I was kind of baffled when I saw his ADP last year. They were floating him around like the back third. I'm like, he had a pretty decent rookie season. He's better than Peyton Hendershot. I'm so confused why people thought that was going to be a thing. And now you have CeeDee Lamb, who's going to be there. That's going to be fine. But as we talked about, is it Brandon Cooks? Is it Jalen Tolbert? I think Ferguson is the second pass catcher in this offense. He and Dak have a pretty strong connection. I know, Rahul, you mentioned about the red zone numbers for Ferguson. I mean, this is still going to be, until we don't see it happen, it's a high volume passing offense. And I think, as we can probably all agree, those running backs aren't going to make it seem like it's anything other than that. And overall, he's only entering his 3rd year, but I think what he's been able to do in spurts in his first year, and again, last year having a tremendous season, I think he's going to probably meet, if not maybe exceed the touchdown number. That might be a bit aggressive there, but that's going to be like the real variance in where he finishes as a tight end. But otherwise, he's going to get tremendous volume. I could see him being another 100 target guy plus. And as the tight end 9, I think I see him finishing better. So why not?
I told you guys that I'm not gonna yap about the same names as I have all summer, so I won't go too much more in. But Ferguson is one of my favorite targets this year. Jerry, any thoughts on Ferguson, or feel free to go on to your first mid-round target?
Oh no, I like Fergalicious a lot. It's another contradiction here is like where I'm all in on Laporta, but this is a year where you can not necessarily fade tight end, but you can get a lot of really good value tight ends a couple rounds later than taking Porta or Laporta. You don't have to. Not that Kelsey can't finish his tight end 1. He definitely can, but I don't think it's like a 100% clear shot that he finishes tight end 1. Where you could get guys like Laporta and actually the tight end of my quarterback that I'm taking as my next target here, Kyler Murray. One of his targets, Trey McBride, could finish up there too. But Kyler Murray is my first guy, QB8, 66th overall. We know what he can do on the ground. They got him possibly the best weapon in this draft with Marvin Harrison Jr. Of course, obviously they lost one of the best weapons in the league with DeAndre Hopkins, but maybe it's a smooth transition. Might get some rookie bumps there, but this is one of those things where it's not just a pure pocket passer, so you have the backup of him being able to run the ball. Of course, that does come with injury risk too, but QB8 potentially could finish as a top 5 quarterback, 66 overall. So you're looking end of the 5th, early 6th, depending on your league size. But and like they upgraded. I don't know if you call it upgraded. They definitely helped out that offensive line a lot. They brought in, I mean, you got Paris Johnson going into his second year. They brought in Jonah Williams on the other side. They brought in Evan Brown as a guard from Seattle. Like they got a lot of new faces on that offensive line. Hopefully they can protect Kyler Murray, let him play 17 games. Michael Wilson is a late round shot that you could take a shot on. Greg Dortch, another late round guy that you could take a shot on. But Kyler Murray, I mean, he doesn't have the sexiest and greatest weapons, but he's got weapons, and hopefully he uses them and gets you a win there.
Another one of my favorite targets. That's why we do this show together. But yeah, I mean, especially with both of those two, just to wrap up those names, I feel like you're drafting both Ferguson and especially Kyler Murray as well at their floors. With that rushing, I struggle to see a fully healthy Kyler Murray finish lower than QB8 when he was the QB9 coming off that ACL last year already. So I really love that shout. I'm going to go on to Christian Kirk, who's been drafted as the wide receiver 31, 72nd overall. Funnily enough, he's actually drafted one spot after Evan Ingram, who's a tight end 8 at 71st. That's an interesting one. But Christian Kirk, I think we're going to see him be returned to being the lead guy for the Jaguars offense, as we did see just 2 years ago. Funnily enough, I remember that Christian Kirk like 40 million like contract being announced, and everyone's like, "Damn, this is the craziest move from a franchise that just can't stop making bad decisions." In this landscape, it's been an absolute steal. In that first year, Christian Kirk was a borderline wide receiver 1, depending on the scoring format, but he really showed a lot. He does tend to play more in the slot, but he's a pretty versatile player and has, more of a deep threat than you do expect from some slot guys, I would say. But I especially had wide receiver 31, like I just hit on with those last two guys. This is going to be the absolute floor. I think you're going to get Trevor Lawrence's leading target at. I can't see, especially in your regular redraft formats, your managed lineup leagues. Christian Kirk and another name I know is bound to hit the airwaves soon, but you could stick them in your lineup and they're going to do exactly what you expect them to do. And he does have that upside, that we've seen in this offense with this quarterback. I think that whole offense should take a step forward. It's a little bit worrying they didn't address the O-line a little bit more heavily. That was clearly a big weakness in the Jaguars team, but I think we saw the worst of a young Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer season aside, and I really expect a bounce back. They brought in Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. Neither of them are going to be volume hogs, especially not Brian Thomas in his first year. He's also not really that profile. Evan Ingram can be a volume hog and does operate in similar areas, but I think there's going to be enough to go around where Christian Kirk easily beats this ADP. So that's my first name here. Chu, what are you thinking? Christian Kirk, he's wide receiver 31. It's kind of going around like a running back, Zamir White, Najee Harris, Raheem Mostert, the names. Jordan Love is right there. It's a little bit harder, in round 6 without knowing your team build. But what do you think of that Kirk value there?
Yeah, I mean, simply just in terms of value, I have him as a wide receiver 26. I think even that, I'm comfortable maybe kind of bumping him like a little bit towards that back end wide receiver too. I think the volume is what really kind of sets him apart in terms of what he's already done, the connection he's already showed, and the fact that nothing in the offseason I think that has happened is really going to be impacting that. Again, you mentioned Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr., neither of which are guys that, like you're saying, are expected to be volume leaders in a team. Evan Ingram is a concern, but I think he will do well in terms of volume for a tight end, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be what it was last year. And I do like that, after Kirk had gotten the chance to leave Arizona, I like that they're using him the right way. If you kept him on the outside or more often than not, that was when he wasn't looking quite as good in Arizona. I think they're using him how he's supposed to be, and he's tremendously good out of the slot. So I like what he's doing there.
Yeah. Just on that Engram point too, he obviously did have a great season, but his season took off after Kirk got injured in week 12 as well. So yeah, no worries on that account. Minor worries, I would say, nothing too serious on that account. True, who's your next mid-round target?
Well, speaking of target hogs, thank you for another tremendous transition there. So I've got Deontay Johnson, the only Panther I will mention today. Don't worry. He has the ADP of wide receiver 38, 87th overall. I have him as the wide receiver 25. I could be looking through rose-colored glasses, but when I see him coming over to an offense that I think is going to be in a much better situation, not only from the offensive line protecting Bryce better, Bryce being while we understand it was an atrocious season by any metric, he has one under his belt. I hope he has the mindset of it can't get any worse. And I hope he knocks on wood when he says that. But I believe in Dave Canales. I believe in the overall offensive mindset and everything that he has going on. He does talk about wanting to make it a run-heavy scheme and kind of build the pass game from that. But I think we saw how beneficial that was for Baker. We saw how beneficial that was for Geno, that kind of stuff. So I do think that this offense as a whole will be tremendously better. And I think Deontay Johnson, he's no stranger to being a 120, 130 plus target guy. He can create separation. He's been known for that the entirety of his career. And the Panthers did not have anyone that could really do that last year. So I think they're in a lot of the interviews and camp talk and everything. It seems like they have a pretty solid connection. And, I trust that just on sheer volume alone, I think he's going to be definitely beat that ADP.
Another player that I've yapped about to no end this offseason. I mean, just on that very last point about separation, I think one thing with Dave Canales and how he got the success out of Geno Smith and then Baker Mayfield is really reduced the time to throw for both those players. I think it's coach speak and common sense says we're gonna see that with Bryce Young as well. I think Bryce is really gonna hit the short and intermediate areas of the field consistently. And yeah, I mean, Deontay Johnson, I really love that call. Jerry, let me pose this question to you. Promise I won't get offended. Can't speak for Chew. Okay, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson.
Don't do it.
Okay, would you rather have Christian Kirk and let's say Devin Singletary, who's RB30? So let's say Christian Kirk and Devin Singletary, or Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson?
I think I'd rather go with the Christian Kirk and Devin Singletary one. I think because I really don't see there's a lot of like competition with Devin Singletary. I'm not really scared of Tyrone Tracy, where Najee Harris, he's got the Jalen Warren problem. And then, I mean, you guys both make good points about the wide receivers, but I'd trust Trevor Lawrence to get he's already has that connection with Christian Kirk 2 years ago. I think Calvin Ridley was kind of got in the way last year, and now he's gone. So, I think Christian Kirk gets back to being what they paid $40 million for.
Point for small talk sports there. We'll take it. Jerry, who's your next mid-round target?
All right, I'm not scared by the rumors. He was a teammate of Deontay Johnson. I'm going with George Pickens, wide receiver 27, 56 overall. He's not really a volume guy per se, but the potential is there. I mean, there are targets open for him to be a volume guy if they want to use him that way. Definitely a quarterback upgrade, either way you look at it. I mean, even if it's Fields, and you could say what you want about Fields, he is an upgrade over Kenny Pickett. But if it's Russ, he's an upgrade over both of them. I wouldn't compare him exactly to this other wide receiver, but if you look at what DK Metcalf did with Russ Wilson, he averaged about 119 targets in the 3 years that they were together. I think he had a career best of, actually got it right up here. He had a career best of 83 receptions in one of those years, over 1,000 yards in that same year, actually. So 1,300 yards in that year, double-digit touchdowns. I think that could be close to what George Pickens can get. There really isn't a huge threat outside of Freiermuth to take a lot of targets away from him. Maybe they do run the ball more, especially with Arthur Smith as the OC there, and Najee and Jaylen Warren are a little better value, but they still got to throw the ball. I think Pickens is. Maybe if they get Ayuk, it's a little bit more scary. But as of right now, Pickens is the guy to be catching all those balls.
Yeah, I mean, assuming things stay status quo, no Ayuk to the Steelers, Pickens will be one of my favorite targets in this kind of range. I just gotta say, just looking at the ADP, we have Malik Neighbors, wide receiver 24, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, George Pickens, all kind of going off that board in the 5th round. That just seems like such a lovely pocket of wide receivers to hit there when those guys each maybe not Pickens and certainly not Neighbors yet, but I mean Higgins and Cooper at least have shown borderline wide receiver number 1 numbers in the past, and that just seems like a very tasty spot. And especially when you're kind of considering team build, Pickens is also a favorite for that reason, because with your let's say 4th or probably your 5th pick, you've probably put some cornerstones in place already in your team, at least one wide receiver, 1 or 2, someone who can hold down the position. And then Pickens just is that guy that's going to raise your ceiling, right? He's such an explosive player. We saw Russell Wilson feed 10 touchdowns to Cortland Sutton. Sutton did a lot. Sutton had some incredible catches, but Pickens is surely a much more explosive player at the stages of their career. So I really love that call, Jerry. I'm going to go to my next player. And that is, you know what? I'll do this guy first. Jaden Daniels, quarterback. He's going QB 14, 105 overall. So quick maths would say that's late 8th. I want to say, don't quote me on that. Certainly not. Jaden Daniels, I think for me at this kind of value, especially, this is considering a 1 QB 12 team kind of format, kind of in that range where no one's really, too antsy to double dip on a quarterback. Jaden Daniels just has that kind of ceiling that we saw from Justin Fields a couple of years ago. It's interesting if you look at underdog, promo code GF2, get on underdog. But if you kind of look at the lines of Jaden Daniels and Anthony Richardson, they're not that far off each other. And is that a gap in the market? I would say Anthony Richardson is probably pretty fairly drafted with his ceiling, but does that mean we need to look at Daniels a little more? Why I like Daniels as well, aside, rushing, Cliff Kingsbury, whatever. He has a few decent weapons. I really like, from a kind of strategy point of view, his price point, because I think this is also a very deep year for quarterback. I'd be very happy grabbing, waiting on QB, grabbing Daniels, but then also can I add, Goff, Purdy, Goff, maybe going a little ahead, but Purdy, Goff, T-Law, Caleb, maybe not because it wants some stability, but Stafford, Cousins, Rodgers. There are a lot of names this year that definitely won't give you the highest of ceilings, but you kind of know, you're going to get that 16 to 18 points week in, week out. And I like pairing that with Jaden Daniels. I got to really say specifically a Goff-Daniels partnership is what I'd like to get, because Goff has a cake first 4 weeks, including 3 in a dome. Give that time for Jaden Daniels to work his way into your team. And if it's not working out, you can pivot. I will have to call out that, I'm definitely very worried about injury with Jaden Daniels. I think that I just heard a stat that he scrambles on 50% of his pressure. So he's going to be taking a lot of hits. Not the best of O-line, the slender frame. It might not be the best offense. We'll yet to see that. So there are a lot of red flags, but with that kind of price point and that QB depth strategy that I was kind of hinting on, I really like that approach in the mid rounds this year, especially if I get priced out of a Kyler Murray, who I love, Dak or Jordan Love. If I don't get Jalen Hurts early on, I'm definitely going to have my eye on Jaden Daniels. Chu, what do you think? We've talked about Jaden Daniels on the show before, but what do you kind of think of Daniels, the price, and maybe that kind of doubling up strategy on QBs?
Well, and you say QB 14, right?
Yeah, QB 14.
So I have him at QB 14. That one kind of works out to where if it falls that way, I'm not uncomfortable going through that process. It's not like oh crap, I've got to pick him. It's like if he falls that far, that means a lot of other things, and my team looks a certain way at that point. I'm comfortable in knowing that I've got a number of other, I think you mentioned cornerstone, like a number of other good, positions pretty locked up at that point to know that I can then, if I'm waiting later for a quarterback, that's a good either first one to get and get another one kind of close after, or I'm the maniac that's comfortable getting Jane Daniels and then I'll wait for Daniel Jones. I don't care. I'm a psychopath when it comes to
Yeah.
that stuff. But I mean, there is upside there. I think, especially when you look at redraft leagues, there's always that concern of the rookie quarterback. And it's like, at the end of the day, do I really want to get this guy who is still figuring out the NFL and have to deal with the weekly ups and downs of a player like that? But at the end of the day, that's why the rest of your team is the floor is kind of raised, so you can kind of absorb the peaks and valleys. So I'm definitely with you on that strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So who's your last mid-round target, Chew?
Well, another tremendous transition. Let's stay at the same team and go to the backfield. Brian Robinson Jr. And I promise we did not plan any of these transitions. It just worked out incredibly well. So Brian Robinson, I know they signed Austin Eckler. There's a bit of uncertainty. Is it Eckler's backfield? I know, considering it's going to be the Cliff Kingsbury offense, that certainly would cater to someone like an Austin Eckler. But I do think it actually will be more of a blend of a Thunder and Lightning type of dynamic, and who better to have that as the complements of Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson. He has an ADP of 92nd overall, so that's the RB 33. I understand it in terms of we don't really know who's going to be the first running back. Kind of similar to a Pittsburgh Steelers situation between Najee and Jalen on a given week. We don't know what it's going to look like, but I do think Brian Robinson is going to has the chance to have another high touchdown year. I think he had about 9 touchdowns total last year. I know that Austin Eckler's bread and butter is catching passes out of the backfield, but Brian Robinson is not too bad at that either. And I do think he's going to be utilized more than he has been so far doing that, just because of a function of the offense. And also, we do have to understand that, Eckler being older, I know they gave him a decent contract, but he may not be able to handle the same volume that he has in the past. And I know he's talked about it before. I want to say that he's kind of tried to manage his volume throughout the season anyway, just taking hits and everything like that. But Brian Robinson he's young. He's a big body. He can handle that, in between the tackles, that kind of stuff. Certainly in the red zone. I know Eckler's a unique weapon in the red zone too, but Brian Robinson, I think at this cost, I'm comfortable taking this because, God forbid injury happens to Eckler, or simply just if I need a flex or anything like that, Brian Robinson feels like a safe, cost-effective bet at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last point, cost-effective, safe bet. Let me ask you, Jerry, would you be comfortable taking just, so Brian Robinson, 92 divided by 12, let's say around round 8 or so. Would you be comfortable if Brian Robinson was your RB2 on your build?
Yeah, 100%. I'm all in on Brian Robinson this year. Eckler doesn't scare me at all. We had good Brian Robinson games, and with what's his name, Antonio Gibson there, which is a similar player to Eckler. So it's I definitely take him.
Yeah, no, that's just kind of what I wanted to get at. Going for strategies, you hear all these terms, zero RB, hero RB, but legitimately just looking at some of these names, this is another pocket. Devin Singletary, Jonathan Brooks, Brian Robinson, Javonte Williams, and almost back-to-back. I feel totally comfortable, getting my maybe a second round Saquon, and then I get one of these guys after loading up in the other positions. And that's definitely a way to work this kind of build. But Jerry, who's your last mid-round target?
Last one is the teammate of your tight end. So not quite a transition from Chew, but Jameson Williams, wide receiver 48, 119th overall. I think you guys know how much I like him. I think I've mentioned him 87 times in our tag team guillotine draft that we got going on. I took him. I don't remember if I did or not. But Jameson Williams, I think he takes a leap this year. He dealt with that suspension last year, was it? He had that
the start of last season, 6 games. Yeah,
and then he's had some injury problem too. But I think he legit steps into that second wide receiver role. Takes a big monkey off of Amon-Ra St. Brown's back. Laporta's going to help with that too. Jared Goff could pass for 5,000 and 35 touchdowns, and I think that Jameson could be a big reason for that. Not a huge volume guy. They don't need him to be. That's Amon-Ra's job. But he can hit the deep ball. He could end up with like a Chargers Mike Williams season if he stays healthy with double-digit touchdowns, maybe 900 yards or so. And for your wide receiver 48 and throwing him in the flex every once in a while, that's a solid spot there.
Yeah, I mean, 119th, so right at the thresholds we set. But I really love that call. You know, you've probably filled out your starting lineup at least with the players you've drafted. Now, this is a guy who the ceiling really could match like the very best in a weekly, individual week basis. Shall we say? Coach speak has been fantastic for this guy. We did talk about it in a couple episodes ago. I will say in that guillotine league, which is, first of all, everyone watching, this is a crazy league, 18 teams. It's too much to get into. Their power-ups. Jameson Williams actually got sniped off our team. Jeff, if you're watching this, we do not forget. We will not forget. But Jameson Williams, definitely a great player to target in drafts this year. Let me go on to my last mid-round target. That's going to be Jonathan Brooks. Just said his name a little bit ago in that same kind of Brian Robinson pocket. Caveat, I would really only want to target him in a league that you have that IR spot so you can, you know, let another roster spot open up, especially in the early weeks. You're going to have to wait on this kind of play, but at RB31, 90th overall, this is one of those, you know, league winning kind of moves. If he comes back from injury and really starts to handle the workload down the stretch, we saw him have a great pass catching profile in college. This is going to be a guy. I mean, next year I would be shocked if we'll have to see how it goes with Bryce Young, Dave Canales, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's like the RB12 off the board last year. I really liked him as a prospect. Really like the Dave Canales, how he's really going to stay true to the run game there. Panthers, even while the offense has not been the best over the last few years, quietly put up some significant rushing yards. Even post CMC, I know Donta Foreman had maybe even 1,000 rushing yards. I don't know if that's right, but Chuba Hubbard's been consistent. We don't speak about Miles Sanders here. But just the last reason on Jonathan Brooks is when you're drafting him, you got to have a plan, right? You have to have a plan to backfill those early spots. Why not the guy we know who is going to step in there? That's Chuba Hubbard, RB44. I think I just saw maybe 39th overall, right? So you're not even going to have to reach on Chuba Hubbard. Just put that guy in there. Chuba Hubbard was RB12 to end the year last year. I want to say maybe a 6-week split, but you know, he's done it before. But the point is, you can plan to not have Jonathan Brooks in your lineup. You have to plan, but you have that information when you go into your draft. If you know you want to target him, to build around that. So let me go right to our resident Panther Chew. What do you kind of think about Jonathan Brooks in redraft league specifically this year?
It really takes, I mean, where you're getting him, it allows for, you know, you likely have set up to where you can take him and you're not going to be penalized for it or punished for it in the sense of, even if you don't have an IR spot, if you're able to fill out the rest of it. And like you said, if it's picking Chuba Hubbard after, I'm honestly still pretty high on Chuba Hubbard this year. I know with Canales coming over, I don't love when the belief is let's always look at what the last place this coach went and let's just compare all the players. But I do think in terms of just general style of being able to kind of handle a workload, do a bit on the ground and through the air, maybe not be the most efficient, but just handle the volume. Chuba Hubbard is, you know, a Rashad White light. Mm-hmm. I'd practice saying that before the show. And I do think he's going to be usurped by Jonathan Brooks once Jonathan Brooks is healthy. He is a better player overall, but I do think that Chuba Hubbard there's been plenty of positive camp talk from Canales and everybody else about Chuba Hubbard. So I do think he definitely has a place there, and especially for the first couple of weeks in the season when Brooks is simply not going to be on the field. And while I understand there's been more positive talk about Sanders this year versus last year, he doesn't acknowledge, I mean, he understands it wasn't as good last year, but he's kind of looking forward to this year. But it's Chuba Hubbard's backfield until Brooks comes back.
Yeah. That, you know, valid concern. Panthers, are they going to be in playoff contention? Probably not as the season kind of, run as the
No.
season kind of like is on his last legs? Is there going to be that need, that desire to push Jonathan Brooks to take a big workload? That's definitely, a consideration. It might just end up being a split backfield. So maybe the call I should have made is draft Chuba Hubbard no matter what. Jamie's saying that IDP Hunter. Damn, the expo is this weekend. Jamie and IDP Hunter hanging out. Hope both of you have a blast at the Fantasy Football Expo as well as everyone watching this. But on the note of Chuba Hubbard, let's go right into our sleepers. Of course, we are about an hour in, so thank you all for sticking with us. Don't want to miss late round sleepers because here, this is where you make your money, right? So, Jerry, who is your favorite sleeper looking at early ADP? This is after 120th overall, so past the 10th round.
All right. So I went with a man by the name of Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 71, 204th overall. He maybe got a little bit of a bump today or yesterday, whatever it was, when Rondell Moore was announced out for the season. He's got a knee injury. We talked about Drake London a little bit earlier in the show, and we're not even 100% sure if Drake London is even not even 100% sure if Drake London is even Kirk Cousins' favorite wide receiver. It's new quarterback obviously in town. Not that he needs a lot of practice or reps or anything like that to get going, because he's been around for a long time, but could end up being Darnell Mooney. Mooney had 1,000-yard seasons with Fields and Andy Dalton throwing him the ball in 1 year. He could have another excellent season. And we're looking, this is 204th overall, so we're way down the list. We don't have to get 1,000 yards out of him. We just got to get some consistency out of him for him to be relevant. Throw him in a flex a couple weeks, and yeah, he's definitely got that potential. They specifically went out and got him this offseason. They got Rondell Moore for basically almost nothing. They sent Desmond Ridder to get more, and in free agency they went out and specifically got Mooney. I think he got the same contract that Gabe Davis got in Jacksonville too.
Not nothing. A reasonable contract.
Getting paid like $40 million, I think, for the next 4 years or so.
I say not nothing for $40 million, guys.
Yeah.
He's doing all right.
He's doing it all right.
Yeah, I think that I even in the 50 to 120, I consider Kyle Pitts. We already talked about London. So we had a lot of Falcons just on this show, but Mooney, I think for his value, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, especially so after the Rondell Moore injury. Tragic as that was, this does open more opportunity for Darnell Mooney. Kind of when you hear about the leadership meetings of the Falcons this offseason, Mooney's always in there in that room. It's always Cousins, London, Pitts, and Darnell Mooney, in that kind of five or whatever you will. So I really like that shout, Jerry. Over to you, Chu, for your favorite sleeper. And I don't know if it was the same guy. We're kind of guessing, but who is it?
Jerry, I misunderstood when you said 204, and I thought we were talking about it was his actual when he was drafted and not his current ADP. I also had Darnell Mooney, but I'm very much, in the same vein. At a minimum, it's Rondell Moore going out, so he already had a good opportunity going in there, getting paid decent money. It's Kirk Cousins and everything. I understand that I was fading Drake London, but again, like we've talked about everywhere, it's all about at cost. What are we getting and what are we paying? And at this point, he did have his 140 target, a little over 1,000-yard season in a sophomore year. I know that wide receiver room is devoid of any real talent, but I think he came on pretty strong in his rookie season, coming out of Tulane. Again, not a lot of tremendous offensive weapons coming out of Tulane, and he put them on the map. And with Kirk Cousins, he's getting that tremendous quarterback that he's going to get to play with. One thing that I did notice from him, I was kind of wondering, as it kind of progressed in his career, his kind of fall off. A bit of it was, I know DJ Moore was added, so he kind of took a step back, understandably. But then there was also, he had some drop issues here and there. Some of it was not necessarily like the amount of drops, but just the certain opportunities, the times that he did drop the ball. But in terms of his usage, when he came into the league, just in terms of percentages, it was more of an 80-20 split in terms of being out wide and in the slot. When he was at Tulane, working out wide was his bread and butter. He's a burner through and through. But he's kind of gradually in last season, it was 35% out wide and 65 in the slot. So it's almost flip-flopped. So I think if he kind of gets a little more to 50-50, if not leaning a little bit more in favor of being out wide, I think it's going to work better for him for fantasy. And I think with Rondale Moore, the expectation was probably Rondale Moore's in the slot and Mooney would be out wide. So I don't know how they're going to figure that out of what's the slot going to look like and everything, but I do hope that they still manage that to where he's more than 50% of the time out wide. And I do think that's going to produce dividends, especially at this cost. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, both our experts were on Darnell Mooney, so I'd expect him, to rise from 200s to probably being borderline drafted in most leagues. But what does that mean? That means that the last round pick for you to take, and I can easily see a path where he's a flex or at the very worst, like a bye week fill in. So great shout from both of you. I'll finish off the show with my sleeper, Rico Dowdle. Maybe this is a case of ADP not catching up. This might be flip-flop by the time we get to the season, but Rico Dowdle, RB46, 144th overall. Zeke Elliott in this is going at 108, so 3 rounds ahead, and at that kind of split, I am going to choose Rico Dowdle. I have, packed my bags full of Zeke Elliott, and then seeing some of this training camp, him wincing over after, a gentle little rep is not great. But when there's such a disparity, when this is a backfield that I absolutely want to solve, similar to the Bengals that we talked about at the start, Cowboys backfield, we must solve it. It's a top 5 scoring offense, most likely, at least projection-wise. It's going to be a good offense this upcoming year. There is some O-line concerns, obviously. They can just, lean heavy on the pass, something that was so successful for them last year. But when there is a huge gap like this, 3 rounds, as I said, between Zeke Elliott and Rico Dowdle, I am going to target the cheaper one. A lot of good camp buzz, and that's why my ADP concern, could this, equalize? Could he go ahead? That's certainly possible. But there has been some buzz that, beat reporters expect or predict him to not necessarily lead the touches, but lead the team in rushing. He has been used, especially last year. He did get some usage in the screen game manufactured touches. So the team does see something about his explosiveness, especially relative to Zeke Elliott, but he, can get some, half PPR points. But in essence, these are the kind of shots I want to take late on in the draft. Say Zeke Elliott gets injured and this is Rico Dowdle's backfield, right? I wouldn't be shocked if people in their weekly rankings are, RB12, Rico Dowdle for the Cowboys, no Zeke Elliott, full workload, right? But that's one of my favorite targets right now. JV is targeting all of us. Unfortunately, we're all first round picks, so gotta get lucky to get the fantasy assessment in your draft. But I think that's been the show for tonight. Thank you all for joining. Before we sign off, Jerry, any last words for the people?
I'm just surprised you didn't go with Darnell Mooney for your guy.
I had to quickly make a change after I realized the second one was also going to be Darnell.
I have Marnell Dooney, same guy.
Yeah.
But no, you could find me at Jerry Wilkie FM on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days. We're pumping out content and sharing stuff from 20, 30 different writers that Jeff has in there, and all the articles and podcasts that we got going on.
Yeah. Definitely check out Going for Two and a great array of writers and making a switch into more of a video focus. I don't know if I should have said that live on air before Jeff has told us the plans. But a lot of great content is the point. So do check out all the shows and writing and whatnot that Going for Two has to offer. Chu, thanks, of course. Any last words for the people?
Yeah, just check me out on Twitter at Father Dynasty, and shout out to everybody at the FF Expo. I went there last year, couldn't go this year, but will be there next year, and enjoy all the booze, all the good food. Check out Table 6 Kitchen and Bar. It's a great time. There's plenty of great drunk food there. Honestly, if you get drunk enough, it all just ends up tasting pretty good. But yeah, have a great time at the expo. It's great people. It's wild. I mean, I remember going last year, the first time, walking in, I went into the bar and as I quickly panned, I noticed 10 people that I watch their podcast every week. So it's wild just to be able to see that many people in the space and just get a chance to talk to them and just, hear what they do. So.
Yeah, no, very exciting. I hope everyone has a great time this weekend. My name is Rahul. You can find me on Twitter at SmallTalkFF. Great time as always with both of you guys. Very grateful to be doing this show and really excited for the NFL season coming up. But that has been the fantasy assessment. Thank you all for joining.